everyone, Guardian of Stories here. I'm your Guardian. Welcome to my channel. Um, I'm coming to you with yet another Warhammer 40k video, specifically the Watcher's Vigilant Homebrew Chapter Showcase. Now, bit of an FYI, I know I'm doing this already very late. I've already screwed up my promise to do every day, so I'm trying to. I've just been running into a lot of real life issues lately that have made it kind of difficult for me to do things, and I've been running into a bit of an issue of burnout. Not more so burnout with just not so much burnout, just lack of motivation to actually do things. Unfortunately, but I am getting this done. I am going to be uploading it tonight. Tomorrow I'll be doing another video as well, making sure it's uploaded early in the morning, like at 10 a.m. from my time at least. Y'all will see it at some point as well, and I'll see if I can double up 2 more uploads on that one as well, for tomorrow, just so you guys have enough to make up for the days I missed this week already. I meant to double up today, but unfortunately it's going to be a bit late. Next video I will be making sure to do better though. Tomorrow specifically, I'll be doing more. Probably will be doing Star Wars recordings. Definitely one of them is going to be Valkyria Chronicles. But regardless, let's get on with this Warhammer 40k video. Now, I got to have my phone because this is where I have all the information for the chapter that I've written. Next time I'll see the next showcase, I'll try and have it on like a Google Docs and have it up for y'all to see. But okay, the Watcher's Vigilant. This is one of my personal homebrew chapters, one that I myself created early on after playing Space Marine 2. I decided I really like the color scheme, and I'll show you, and you'll be able to see in a little bit, probably around here-ish, is where the picture is going to be up, and you'll see what they look like. I personally enjoy the color scheme, especially when playing Bulwark. Alright, now for the good info. The chapter master of the Watcher's Vigilant is Lord Commander Caranthier. They use very much different titles compared to the average Codex compliant chapter. They don't use captain or chapter master. Obviously, chapter masters are referred to as Lord Commanders, and the actual captains are just Lord Captains. Sergeants are still sergeants. Lieutenants are still lieutenants. However, the captains and the captains and the chapter masters are Lord Captains and Lord Commander. Slightly taken a little bit from, and I'll go ahead and tell you right now, the original base inspiration for it was the Death Watch. Well, it's basically just the Death Watch. These guys are very similar to the Death Watch in how I wanted to write them, but they're not part of the Death Watch. These guys are not just Death Watch reskins. They do have their own stuff to them, and I'll get to that in a minute. Right. This chapter is specifically a fleet-based chapter. It does not have a particular homeworld, but rather a large swath of recruiting worlds. It has over a dozen different recruiting worlds. Less so, like, these are legitimate worlds that they always recruit from. They only have 2 or 3 that they actively cultivate recruits from. Two of them are feral worlds and one's a death world. They're not particularly large of people on them. However, they do also take a bit of a wider gene pool as well from a few other worlds. One's a hive world, and the rest are various civilized worlds. All spread along all also relatively low populations compared to most Imperial planets. It's basically a long swath of them. Where they tend to congregate, however, is mostly in the trying to remember the exact area of space. Let me scroll down a little bit. So it's also a little bit like disorganized and disjointed. Let's see. Best way I can put it is they tend to be around, say, in between, somewhere in the spaces between Segmentum Pacificus and Segmentum Obscurus. In between those areas, they were heavily affected by the opening of the Great Rift, but I'll get to that in a moment. Yes, they are a fleet-based chapter, pretty much entirely off of, their battle barge and their fleet. Their battle barge specifically what they use, essentially their mobile fortress monastery, is the modified battle barge Endless Vigil. They are not Codex compliant whatsoever. Well, I said they're not Codex compliant in the more standard sense. They do have a very different way of working through it. Um, each chapter, the, the origin of the chapter for genetic lineage isn't entirely known. Most of the records are sealed. Several of the records, and most records of them are either sealed, non-existent, or were destroyed when an administratum world that held said records was taken out during a Black Crusade. Um, again, there are some unsealed reports that do have the reports of this. Damn it, let me redo it. There are some confirmed reports that are not stupid sealed by the Inquisition or High Lords or anyone else. No one actually knows where the sealing is coming from, but that's just how it is. It's sealed. You can't really. The access isn't allowed easily. But by the way, going off of how they act and the way they fight and the technology as well, in terms of the tactics they use rather than just technology, it tends to be is believed they are either Imperial Fists or Dark Angels successors. Um, they do know that the gene seed is rather pure. It's very stable gene seed. It is not There's not a huge number of flaws, so it's believed closer to Dark Angels. Um, the exact founding for this chapter is also unknown. However, it is believed to be at some point in the 39th millennium, or M39, which makes them an originally firstborn Astartes chapter. The war cry is a somewhat unique. I say somewhat unique for me. It is at least. Um, the war cry is a bit long. By order of the Golden Throne, our lives are given to the Eternal Watch. And as I'll say just by going off that, you can probably guess another aspect of this chapter that was inspired was from Game of Thrones with the Night's Watch. The chapter Gene Seed, again, very similar to the lineage and origin, is not entirely well known. The results of where they come from is not published, and quite honestly, the chapter itself doesn't really care all that much. The most they care about is just making sure it's not from one of the Trader Primarchs. Otherwise, they do not care. However, like I had said earlier, it is a rather stable gene seed, remarkably stable. Not stable, remarkably stable compared to some other chapters, at least. Now for what we know of for confirmed history. I said what we know of. I'm the one who wrote it. Much of the history of the Watcher's Vigilant chapter is lost because due to several administratum worlds that held these records being destroyed. Now, when I say records, that doesn't just mean the foundation of the chapter, but also any fights the chapter participated in certain regions. Any information that wasn't destroyed has been sealed by order of the Inquisition, though whether the Inquisition did so on orders of the High Lords is also unknown. The chapter's founding is on the exact point of the chapter's founding is debated, though once again suspected to have been sometime in the 39th millennium. The earliest reports of confirmed action by the Watcher's Vigilant that isn't sealed, that is, that can be outright confirmed and verified, is in the year 128 of M40. During which in that campaign they were on a campaign against an orc war by orc war boss Thrakborga. How am I mispronouncing this? I'm the one that wrote this. God dang it. Thrakborga on the night on the, who was leading a war against a couple Mechanicus worlds, or rather night worlds. Night House worlds, the Imperial Night worlds, basically. Specifically, again, with two particular planets that were heavily affected, being the Night worlds of Acheron and Boreas. During the conflict on Acheron, the Watcher's Vigilant fought alongside Night House Volcanus of the Questor Mechanicus. So this was a more Mechanicus aligned Imperial Night House. Now, the forces of House Volcanus, alongside that of the Watcher's Vigilant, battled Warboss Thrax's horde, his Wa, and eventually repelled him from the planet of Acheron. Um, However, Acheron was not the only one being hit at that time. While the majority of Warboss Thrax's Wa had hit that planet, another smaller section of it, roughly a quarter, had gotten separated in the warp, because this happens quite often. They don't have a way of accurately navigating the warp. They don't really care to. For them, for orcs, if you don't know, in 40k, they enjoy going into the warp with very little to no navigation and nothing to protect them from anything boarding their ships while in transit in the warp. Because for them, that's in-flight entertainment. For them, that's movie. That's a movie. That's that's entertain. That's in-flight entertainment. It's a movie on a flight for them. So they love that. They love when demons show up. So the section got separated because that happens, and ended up on the night world of Boreas. Now, Warboss Thrak was not killed on Acheron, but rather he decided to. He had stolen a couple knights that were damaged from House Volcanus, and took that stuff, looted it, and left. He booked it out of there when he saw he was about to get his ass kicked. Um, to The Watchers Vigilant, stuck around to take a small detachment of them. Roughly three companies of Space Marines were involved in this, just because that's what happened to be there at the time. It was the second, the fifth, and the ninth orders Um, each of these orders are basically the company formations. And yes, I understand that by calling them orders, which I thought was clever until I remembered that the first company would have to be called the First Order, which is a Star Wars thing, unfortunately. I'm still keeping it. I'm not changing it, but whatever. The second, the fifth, and the ninth orders happen to be together, and not in any particular order. Most of they happen to already be around in some form, and so grouped together and just managed to beat the heck out of the orcs alongside the knights of House Volcanus. Um, they continued on chasing after the war boss, because you got it. War bosses are like ant hives. They and their wars don't like to. If you don't take them out, there's always that good chance that they will rebuild and get stronger and get bigger again. Especially if you didn't do a huge amount of, say, absurd damage to their ward, to the point where they start having challenges rise up to beat the heck out of them. So they chase them around all the way to the world of Boreas, at the other end of the subsector. In that subsector is again that world Boreas, headed by the Night House Everwind, the Questor Imperialis House Everwinter. And the difference between a Questor Mechanicus house and a Questor Imperialis house is Questor Mechanicus house owe allegiance to the Mechanicus, to the wider Mechanicum, and take lead from them from pretty much anything. They'll listen to them before almost anything, unless the Emperor himself says otherwise, and even then, it's only because they already see him as the Omnissiah, more than likely. The Questor Imperialis is more neutrally aligned, in the sense of they follow whatever the High Lords say and whatever the rest of the Imperium states. Yes, they will still listen to the Mechanicus, because the Mechanicus keeps their stuff running, but they're not going to owe allegiance so heavily to the Mechanicus as much as the rest of the Imperium as well. So they're a bit more evened out in that sense. The House Everwinter, like I said, runs Boreas, so they also called for aid, but at the time were a bit larger than the House Volcanus. However, at the time, not all the knights were. Quite a few of the knights were being worked on and repaired, so they were not able to repel that small section of the. Wait, no, I messed that up. Sorry. House of Volcanus is larger. They lost a couple of stuff that was their knights that got stolen by the Greenskins. House Everwinter wasn't too much smaller. It was pretty large. It was still large in of itself. It had like around over 100 knights. Volcanus had like around 100, basically had like 140. This is House Everwinter, which has like 100, almost roughly 120. So a bit less than 120. So they were able to hold the ground against a much smaller force of Warboss Thrax Wa, his horde of orcs. However, that's because roughly a quarter of Thrak's forces were on Boreas, whereas the other three were being, hammered and anviled by the Watchers Vigilant and House Volcanus. Volcanus didn't join the Watchers Vigilant in chasing after. Most of House Volcanus didn't chase after the the retreating forces of Thrak. Most of it stayed. A couple dozen, maybe a dozen or two knights went with the Watchers to hunt them down and get rid of them permanently. Otherwise, they just come back. They're like ants and cockroaches. You kind of need to make sure you get them all. You got to make sure to get them all. Otherwise, they just repopulate and reconstitute, and then boom, you have the problem all over again. And initially, when Thrak arrived on Boreas, he pushed the Knights of House Everwinter back pretty well. But then again, hammer and anvil. But this time he couldn't get away because while he was busy fighting the House Everwinter in a pitched battle, the Watchers Vigilant chapter drop potted all around him. Thunderhawks, scout bikes, Thunderhawks. I think I already mentioned that. Speed bikes, everything. They hit him with everything hard and fast. Managed to take out his guard, and Lord Captain Varamir of the Second Order arrived and killed Warboss Thrak in single combat. Managed to cut him down and kill him. This incident allowed them to wipe out the Wa of Warboss Thrak Borgar and gain them a pretty good relationship with Night Houses Volcanus and Everwinter. Enough that these houses will repeatedly come to the aid of Watchers Vigilant if called. And again, this was during the campaign of. Again, this is the campaign of the year 128 M40. Now, since the combat against Warboss Thrak, they have in fact done other combat against other groups. There are numerous confirmed skirmishes and combat reports of them engaging other orc war bosses or forces of other orc war bosses, especially during the Octarius conflict, during which they were operating on the fringes, where orcs fleeing from the Octarius war came into contact with some elements of the Watchers Vigilant chapter, and they were hunting down and engaging these fleeing orcs, as well as the chasing, as well as reports of them fighting against small splinters of Tyranid hive fleets, especially in the aftermath of the Octarius War. I think I said this earlier as well. They have engaged forces from the Eldar as well, usually Corsairs, occasionally Dark Eldar raiding parties. There's unconfirmed reports and rumors of them fighting against Craftworld Eldar, but that's unsubstantiated. There's nothing to say one way or the other. Nothing so far on them dealing with any Necrons. However, there's a good chance they have. Again, nothing confirmed. There are still, since the Great Rift's opening, they have most certainly been involved in combat, especially confirmed ones, in conflict with several Chaos forces, particularly any warbands coming from that are related to the Alpha Legion, Emperor's Children, and the Wordbearers. In Imperium Sanctus, after the opening of the Great Rift, they've engaged 3 separate warbands at 3 different points during the era Indomitus. One other company of this chapter has been cited, other than the 2nd, 5th, and 9th, and this being the Third Order, meaning the Third Company. The Third Company was seen entering the Nachman Gauntlet at full strength in order to pass into Imperium Nihilus for the purpose of reconnecting with other members of the chapter, other forces and aspects of the chapter that they'd been cut off from, as well as checking on whatever recruiting worlds were on the other end of the Great Rift. This obviously implies that the chapter is relatively spread out across a relatively wide area, not just in one giant roving fleet, and that those that have been seen since the Great Rift on Imperium Sanctus are not the full chapter, obviously. No idea knowing exactly how many of their forces and resources are on the dark side of the Imperium, but certainly probably a good chunk of it. The Nachman Gauntlet, for those who don't know, being a section of the Great Rift that is the only really stable, emphasis, quotation, air quotation on stable, route in and out of Imperium Nihilus. This is the world where the planet of Vigilant is on. Um, Speaking of Era Indomitus, the chapter is confirmed to have gotten a hold and been given Primar's technology and Marines. However, it's still one of those things where no one really knows exactly what their chapter is made of. What their Nobody really knows exactly what their gene seed is. With the Torchbearer fleet that went to them having been, again, no one really knows. It was entirely made up of the only ones who knew were the Custodes and the Mechanicus personnel that went with it. Alright, enough about some of the history, let's go into the culture. The Watchers Vigilant are, as you can probably guess, a very secretive and reclusive chapter. They tend to fight their battles alone at the edges of the Imperium, only rarely asking for assistance, and the assistance they normally do get comes from either the night houses they've aided, so Everwinter and Volcanus, whatever guard forces, or PDF, planetary defense forces, or Imperial naval forces happen to be in the area at the time of the conflict, or they will specifically often ask for aid from the Death Watch, because one of the things they tend to fight the most are Xeno forces, so Eldar, Orcs, Tyranids. Again, nothing confirmed on the Necrons as of yet. They definitely haven't fought the Tau, not as of yet. They're kind of on the opposite end of the Imperium from the Tau. Um, one thing about the chapter's culture and organization, however, is that every Lord Captain and thus Lord Commander has been chosen from those who have returned from the Death Watch. So generally speaking, the first candidates to get picked to be put up for the first candidates to be up for debate on taking the position. Basically, anytime a new officer position opens up for the captaincy, either captaincy or chapter master, they always tend to be the first candidate to be put up for the candidacy is usually a veteran who's already done a term of service for the Death Watch. They do tend to come back, however. Not always, but those who come back tend to be the first ones up for pick. So they do seem to have a decent relationship with the Death Watch. Not necessarily the Inquisition at large, but the Death Watch at bare minimum. As I said, the other thing is that every member of the Watchers Vigilant all have blade weapons of some kind. Even if they have things like power fists or thunderhammers, they also have a power sword, a power axe, a storm claw, or a combat knife, or a chainsword of some kind. For whatever reason, everyone has a blade, at least one blade of some kind. And it doesn't matter if they have hammers as well or anything else. They have a blade of some kind as well. Um, as I as I had mentioned earlier, the organization of the chapter, all the companies are referred to as orders. So first order, second order, third order, fourth order. With each one possessing the same elements that you would normally find in a compliant codex chapter. Um, the chap, although generally speaking, each of these orders also has some small elements of the rest of the other units in the chapter. Though whether this is indicative of each one being self-sufficient companies, so each company being basically having everything mixed to one, focusing heavily on one type, but having support elements of the others to be more flexible, or if this is just a case of that tends to be how Space Marine task forces work, where you don't just have an entire company of one unit thrown at a problem. It tends to be a task force made up of several aspects of different companies thrown at the problem, because that way they can still have that tactical versatility. is unknown. Um, as said before, the confirmed orders of the chapter that they know exist and they've been seen in combat repeatedly are the second, third, fifth, and ninth orders. There's no other records currently of the other orders. Um, of the other orders, though, they're believed to still exist. Um, One of the things that makes them stick out from from standard codex compliance is definitely the squad level. Most squads tend to be, you know, at about 10 members, and the updated version of the Codex Astartes from Gilliman in the Era Indominus is basically allowing smaller fire teams of 5 members instead of full squads of 10, just for a bit better tactical usage. The, the Watchers Vigilant don't normally fight in that manner. Each squad is referred to as a brotherhood and can range in size from 5 members to 20. To 20 depending on size and age. Depending on size and age and makeup. And makeup, meaning what weapons are used, however many Marines happen to be in it at the time because of combat losses, or as well as the age and veterancy of the individual Marines present in that squad, as well as who happens to be leading it. A captain's probably going to have more members, and new squads will probably be about at a max of 20, whilst the captains will probably have closer to 15, and the older squads might have 5 to 10 only. And it very much depends, but individual brotherhoods can go from 5 to 20. They don't really have a set size, kind of just whatever they happen to have at the moment. The overall strength of this chapter is not well known. It is believed to be about 1,000 Marines, based off of, again, rough size of each order. It's believed to be still the same size as a regular chapter, but that's again not confirmed because the full chapter has never been brought to. The full strength of the chapter has never been brought to bear. Again, roughly 4 companies are confirmed to exist. With unconfirmed reports of at least 5 others. Again, judging just off the fact that there are 9 company orders, that you would imagine that since 4 are known, there's at least another 5 that haven't. No idea if the 10th company exists. I, of course, as a writer, know, but I'm not telling that. But you can probably guess that it does exist, but the rest of the Imperium doesn't know quite well. As you can tell from the pictures that will be shown being shown alongside this, the overall colors of the chapter and the Marines are black and green with a gold trim. Specifically, I did in fact use Abaddon black and Calibanite green, and I believe it was just straight gold trim for the colors that are being used in Space Marine 2. I did try and make obviously on some of the pictures you will have already seen while this video has been going on, the symbols I put for them on Space Marine 2, because I don't have all the different symbols and chapters from DLCs. It is these in the game. It is left shoulder is the bird symbol that the Raven Guard uses, and the right symbol is just a downward pointing sword from the Dark Angels. However, the actual symbol that will be used if I was, say, painting them or making the thing in a different medium is I drew it as best I could. I'm not an artist by any means, but it's basically this. Thinks this but better. Specifically being in case you can't tell what it is a shield. The symbol is of crossed swords on a shield with an open, watchful eye in the center of the shield and crossed swords. And because it's meant to be, a watchful vigil, because again, meant to represent the name of the chapter, the Watchers Vigilant. The full fleet, the full fleet that has been. I will say this. I will tell you exactly how big the fleet of the Watchers Vigilant is. It's for how I decided to make it. Obviously, you've already heard the main battle barge they use, which is the modified battle barge that serves the Fortress Monastery, is the modified battle barge Endless Vigil. They have a second battle barge, which is the Eternal Witness. That's their main combat ship, the heaviest combat ship. Um, usually alongside that and the Endless Vigil are the strike cruisers Eye of Eternity and Watcher of the Void. Can you tell there's a theme yet? um, there are also two additional strike cruisers that are unnamed, as well as 8 Vanguard cruisers, which are basically uh, stripped down strike cruisers, where they're meant to have better. They're basically faster, bit more heavily focusing on weapons and armor, and less on crew capacity and passengers, meaning they don't have as many Marines to deploy, but they are a bit more built for naval combat, as well as a dozen Gladius class escort frigates to help round out the fleet and deal with lighter warships and with scouting and skirmishing. The known characters, other than Chapter Master Lord Commander, the Chapter Master Caranthea, is, as I said earlier, the second captain, aka second Lord Captain Varamir, third Lord Captain Constantine, basically Constantine but with a Y instead of an I, um, fifth Lord Captain Brantioch, and ninth Lord Captain Antioch, with Antioch being pronounced the same way as Brantioch but with a Y instead of an I. So yeah, I did alternate spellings because I couldn't think of names very well. Yeah, so that, and as you can again, you can see I've been showing you pictures of this entire chapter. As you can see, this is what I have for. This has been the showcase of my homebrew firstborn bit more mysterious Space Marine chapter, The Watcher's Vigilant. As I just said, meant to be a bit more mysterious and unknown because I felt like doing that. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this one, and you know the standard drill with this. Please, if you enjoyed this video, press the like button, subscribe for more, leave a comment, tell me if you enjoyed it or not. Check out the rest of the videos in the playlist this will be attached to, my homebrew and writing playlist. Also, go check out my Space Marine 2 overall playlist, my Space Marine 2 campaign playlist, as well as the other playlists on the channel. But yeah, see you guys next time. Hopefully, this thing's probably not gonna come out today. The day I'm filming this, so it's probably gonna come out the day after. So yeah, probably see you on the 30th of April. See y'all.